Okay, so today we are continuing the narrative of Joseph in the Holy Bible study for Genesis chapter 45. We only got a few more chapters left to go here in the narrative of Joseph, but this week we are at a big point in his story. It is where he is finally going to reveal himself to his brothers who have long thought him to be dead, along with their father, who also has thought he has been dead. So it's going to be a big shock to them because last chapter they went from being in fear for their lives at the hands of this Egyptian governor, believing that their little brother Benjamin was going to be taken as a slave and a servant to Pharaoh, to now realizing that not only is Benjamin not going to go into slavery or servanthood to Pharaoh, but that he's going to be able to return with them to their father Jacob, and they're going to bring their father and all their family with them back to Egypt to be abundantly blessed by this governor who just so happens to be their estranged brother Joseph, whom they thought was dead this whole time, for I believe it was over a decade. So it's going to be a very happy reunion, and it is going to be a climactic point in this story of Joseph. So Genesis chapter 45, verse 1. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him, and he cried, "Cause every man to go out from me." And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. Now we're going to find here he's crying, and he's crying very loudly. He can't control it. And you'd say, why is that? Because Joseph right now is the one in control. His brothers should be the one afraid. Well, it's because in chapter 44, we ended with Judah pleading for Joseph to take himself, Judah, as a slave, as a servant to Pharaoh, so that Benjamin, his little brother Benjamin, who is Joseph's blood brother, could return to their father Jacob, because if they did not bring Benjamin back with them to Jacob, Judah told Joseph, "My father is going to die," from just depression and grief, because Judah was explaining to him he already lost one beloved son in Joseph. So if he now loses another beloved son, the only two sons to his beloved wife Rachel, it will surely drive him to death, to the grave, in grief. The pain will be too much. So Joseph, while he was playing games with his brothers, sending their money back in their sacks and food back in their sacks and his silver cup back in their sacks, and had him going back and forth so that he could be reunited with his little brother Benjamin. And now in Joseph's mind, his plan was, I'm going to keep Benjamin with me, and eventually, I'm going to bring my whole family back. But his plan got thwarted here because he was overcome with emotion when he heard that his father would die if Benjamin didn't return. So now Joseph's going to switch up the plan. He's just going to come clean. He's going to tell them, I am your brother. How is my father? Bring him to me. So now, in the long run, Joseph was going to bring his whole family to him, but he still wanted to play with his brothers a little bit. But since his father's life could possibly be endangered by this little game Joseph was playing with his brothers, he finally puts the game to an end and says, look, all of you, come to me. Look in my eyes. I am your brother, Joseph, the same brother you sold into slavery. It's me. Verse 2, he wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. See, when we last left them, again, they were in fear for their life in chapter 44. They're thinking, oh, Lord, what did Benjamin do? Why did he take the cup of Pharaoh's governor? What was he thinking, this young guy? Because now he put all of our lives in danger. Now Pharaoh's going to have us all killed because of what we've done to his beloved Egyptian governor. Now, it had to be within the same hour of them having this great fear inside of them that Joseph says, look, fear not. Even though I'm the governor of Egypt, I am also a Hebrew, and I am also your brother. The same one you thought was dead all this time. It's me. It's Joseph. So you got to imagine, they're speechless because they're shocked beyond belief. And I'm sure a lot of them were feeling great remorse and guilt that this one who they thought they left for dead, or that was killed by the Egyptians when he was sold into slavery to them, is not only still alive, but he is now the second most powerful man in the entire world. Talk about shock and just a range of emotions running through their bodies and their minds. So they're speechless. They could not answer him. They were troubled at his presence. And Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that you sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. Now this is a lesson we all need to learn. Joseph could have been going off on all of them right now saying, how dare you? How dare you? Number one, almost leave me for dead, but number two, sell me, your brother, into slavery? You know what I've gone through the last decade? Do you know I've been in prisons? I've been in dungeons? Do you have any idea what you put me through? Instead of acting like that, like most human beings would, Joseph recognized that it was God's will. Everything that had happened to him up to this point, including his brothers selling him into slavery, was God's will, because Joseph saw the bigger picture. Through the Holy Spirit, he was able to see the bigger picture. That God has sent me here for a reason. And the reason God sent me to Egypt, the reason I am now governor of Egypt after all I've been through, is so that I can preserve your lives and the life of my father and my family. That's why all of this happened. So do not be grieved. Do not be angry. What you did, what you thought was a curse, God has turned into a blessing. God has turned into good, not only for me, but for all of you, for our Father, and for our entire family. For God did send me before you to preserve life. Friends, we all need to think like that. When someone does you wrong, or when you're put in a bad spot or a bad position, and you think you have the right to be angry, you have the right to be grieved, you have the right to be jealous or whatever else, just remember, wherever you're at, God can use you to be a blessing. God can change any curse into a blessing. God will uplift you to where he wants you to be in his due time, if it's his will. So don't complain, don't whine, don't mope. Just look at the bigger picture. Ask the Holy Spirit to reveal to you what God is doing and what he's going to do. And just like Joseph, you're going to see that in the end, it was all God's plan. Everything that happened was because God sent you there. God put you there for some reason. And more than likely, it will be a very good reason. For these 2 years, Joseph said, hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in the which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. So here he's revealing to his brothers that God revealed to him that there shall be 7 years of famine, and only 2 have passed. So he's letting them know, look, there's still going to be another 5 years of famine coming. We're not getting out of this famine anytime soon. But verse 7, he said, God sent me before you, my brothers, to preserve you and our family a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So while you, under the influence of the devil, tried to take my life for your own selfish reasons, whatever it was, God instead flipped it and used me to save your lives. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God, and he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Haste you, and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not, and you shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near unto me, you and your children, and your children's children, and your flocks, and your herds, and all that you have. And there will I nourish you, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty. And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh unto you. Now the reason here why they knew somebody wasn't putting on an act, and this was Joseph, is because when he's saying, it is my mouth, it's because he's speaking to them in the Hebrew tongue. And the Egyptians despised Hebrews from birth, so they did not speak Hebrew. So the fact that he's speaking to them in their own language, they recognize, even though he may not look like the Joseph they remember, because he now looks like an Egyptian, they can tell by the Hebrew dialect he is truly who he says he is. Verse 13, And you shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that you have seen, and you shall haste and bring down my father here. And he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck, and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. Again, Benjamin, as I pointed out in previous chapters, this is his blood brother. They're all his brothers under Jacob. But Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife, only had 2 of the 12 children of Israel, and those 2 were Joseph and Benjamin. So they were near and dear not only to Jacob's heart, but the fact here that those 2 blood brothers under Rachel are being reunited, imagine the tears of joy they had to be crying right now. Moreover, he kissed all his brethren and wept upon them, and after that his brethren talked with him. And the fame thereof was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brethren are come, and it pleased Pharaoh well, and his servants. This is why Joseph is such a big deal, not only in the book of Genesis, but the entire Holy Bible and history. Because, as I've said, the Egyptians despised the Hebrews, absolutely despised them. But the fact that this guy Joseph was so beloved to Pharaoh and was so beloved to everyone that knew him in Egypt, when they found out that he actually was a Hebrew, that didn't change their feelings for him in one bit whatsoever. They still loved him. They still respected him. They still honored him. They still placed him above everyone else in Egypt except for Pharaoh, even though he was a Hebrew, because of the type of man Joseph was. And I've explained all throughout his narrative what kind of man he was, a man we all need to strive to be like. So Pharaoh and his servants were pleased that these Hebrews had come into Egypt, and that this governor under Pharaoh was actually a Hebrew from the land of Canaan. this whole time. And he still loved him. He still respected him. He still kept him in power because of how good of a servant Joseph was to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Say unto your brethren, This do you, lady your beasts, and go, get you unto the land of Canaan. Take your father and your households, and come unto me, and I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat the fat of the land. Now, what a difference a century or two makes, because here in the book of Genesis, this Pharaoh of Egypt is blessing Jacob and the children of Israel abundantly, as much as he possibly can. He's favoring them over all the people in his land, going to give them whatever they want, the best of the land. And yet, in the next book, in the book of Exodus, when Moses comes around, that Pharaoh is going to be the children of Israel's worst enemy. He's going to have them as slaves in his land. He's going to be beating and disrespecting them and killing them. And yet the Pharaoh in Joseph's day is doing the exact opposite of that. Same land, same title of leader, Pharaoh, but two totally different hearts. This one loved the children of Israel for Joseph's sake. So he said, I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat the fat of the land. Now you are commanded by Pharaoh, this do you, take your wagons out of the land of Egypt for your little ones, and for your wives, and bring your father, and come. Also regard not your stuff, for the good of all the land of Egypt is yours. And the children of Israel did so. And Joseph gave them wagons according to the commandment of Pharaoh, and gave them provision for their way. To all of them he gave each man changes of raiment, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of raiment. So just like, if you remember, when they all sat down to dinner, even though Benjamin was the youngest of all of them, the smallest of all of them, Joseph gave him far more food, far more rations of food than any of the rest of them. And so now, too, he's favoring his blood brother Benjamin and giving him 5 changes of clothes instead of 1 like everybody else, and 300 pieces of silver. And to his father he sent after this manner, 10 asses laden with the good things of Egypt, 10 she-asses laden with corn and bread and meat for his father by the way. So he sent his brethren away, and they departed, and he said unto them, See that you fall not out by the way, meaning, do not tarry. Don't stop off somewhere. Just go straight to Dad, get him, and bring him here, because this famine ain't going away. And they went up out of Egypt, and came unto the land of Canaan, unto Jacob, their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. Honestly, would any of us believe them? If someone we had thought was dead for about a decade or more, all of a sudden just so happens to still be alive, and on top of that, not only is that person still alive, but they are the second most powerful person in the entire world? Come on now. So Jacob's looking at him like, this is not something you want to joke with me about. It's not funny, haha. So, enough. Don't joke about something like that. So he believed him not. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said unto them. And when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived, because he knew when they went to Egypt to buy food, they were in the famine going poor. And they were also going to be in trouble with Pharaoh's governor, because if you remember, he had stuck stuff in their sacks, so he had thought they had stole from them. And so Jacob was worried that his youngest son Benjamin would not come back with them because of the anger that the children of Israel would incur in Egypt for their supposed theft. Not only did Jacob not expect them to come back, he didn't expect Benjamin to come back with them. He didn't expect them all to come back alive. And on top of that, he definitely didn't expect them to come back with wagons filled with the greatest things of Egypt inside of them. So when he looked outside and saw these wagons filled with all the corn and the bread and the meat and all these gifts from Joseph and the Pharaoh of Egypt, he knew this is the only explanation for this, is that they must be telling the truth. Joseph must truly be alive and be the governor of Egypt. How else could this happen? There's no other explanation. And Israel said, and Israel obviously being Jacob, "It is enough. Joseph, my son, is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die." So Jacob now, who had not seen Joseph, again for well over a decade, thought Joseph was dead. His beloved son thought his beloved son was torn apart by wild beasts. All of Joseph's brothers brought Jacob a bloody piece of clothing, the coat of many colors that Jacob had given him as a child. And Jacob was heartbroken and grieved for so many years, thinking his beloved son was gone. And now, all of a sudden, his son is yet alive. So, Jacob is just on top of the world, and he can't get to Egypt fast enough. And that's where we're going to pick up next week, when Jacob and his sons go back to Egypt, and Jacob gets to be reunited with his beloved son Joseph. And the story just keeps getting better and better. And that's going to close the narrative of Joseph. And then we're going to end the book of Genesis with a couple chapters dealing with Jacob and all the children of Israel. And then finally, the blessing of Jacob, Israel, over his children and the children of Joseph, whom Jacob is actually going to adopt. Get into all that next week. Hope you all enjoyed it, friends. Hope you're enjoying the narrative of Joseph. And until next week, have a great weekend. God bless y'all, and God speed.